Hi everybody, I'm Tim Johnson, Associate Editor at American Woodworker Magazine, and I'm here with our ace videographer Jason Zentner and my good friend Alan Lacer. Alan is well known in the world of wood turning, and he is the author of American Woodworker's Turning Wood Department. Alan, I understand, however, that you're wanted in 50 states. Would you care to explain yourself?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. No, I've now taught or demonstrated in all 50 states and also some other countries too. I've been to Japan 3 times, I've been to Belgium, Switzerland, and Ireland. I've either did direct teaching, demonstrating, or presentations in those countries.
Oh. Well, today we're here to talk about a special project, and this is the project that we're going to talk about is turning a 2-piece spinning top. And this is a project that Alan has authored as a story for our wood turning department. It appears in the February-March issue of American Woodworker. Alan, would you like to explain a little bit about a 2-piece spinning top as opposed to perhaps a 1-piece or 500,000-piece spinning top?
Okay. Well, 1-piece finger tops. These are finger tops. We don't wrap a string and throw them. We don't use a holder to spin them. These are just done by like snapping your fingers. Well, most of these, it's safe to say, are 1-piece tops is what you would see more commonly. These are 2-piece. I've learned this from a German turner, and it's been around for a long time. Other turners here have done it. And you do this as 2 separate pieces. Now, this has some advantages. One, if you ever broke the stem, you could return this piece, calling this the stem or the axle. It also, though, allows me to use contrasting woods like I have here. Here I used a contrasting wood, and I did some chatter work on it, Tim. Yeah.
Is this the tool that you're going to use?
You know, this is a tool that I would use for the whole project, start to finish, but not everybody is adept with a skew chisel.
This is a skew chisel that we're looking at. Okay.
And so what I'll do, I'll use the skew, but also show you how I would use a gouge and some parting tools.
Okay.
For those that are still learning.
Okay, well, why don't we head over to the lathe and get started?
All right.
Tell me about these other tools that you've got here. What are the things that we need in order to be able to make these little tops?
All right, well, obviously we're going to need the wood, and for the body or the disc, I use hard maple, either for chattering or also for the marbling I'm going to show in another video.
Now, why is it so long? I mean, I can understand that you need it that size for the diameter, but why isn't it like really thin?
Well, when I set up to do these, I don't set up to do one of them, because really make several of these.
Okay.
Out of this one I should be able to get a number, 5 to 7 perhaps.
So inside this one blank you got enough to turn a bunch of these little guys.
Right.
Okay.
And also you're going to lose some for the chucking, and there's 2 ways at least to chuck. One is, now this is a square between 1.5 to 1 3/4, and it'll actually fit into these scroll type chucks like this.
Okay.
And these are very nice and lovely, but if you don't have that.
So a scroll chuck, the jaws in this chuck actually scroll in and out. That's
right, with a key.
Okay.
And that will allow me to center it and lock her in there very, very safely.
So the scroll chuck just screws right onto the headstock, correct? Onto the drive shaft? Well, what if I don't have one of those things?
Well, and this is relatively new in wood turning. We've been doing wood turning for thousands of years, so there's always an alternative. What I've done here is simply turned a number 2 Morse taper out of a piece of hard maple that was started between centers.
So you mounted this between centers, okay.
Right.
Okay.
And you can make a little gauge, or you can just take some meadshots off one of your Morse tapers.
Why the Morse taper?
Because what it'll do, it'll drive right in to the hollow on your headstock spindle, and then I tap this in with a mallet. It doesn't hurt the lathe.
Okay.
And unlike a metal one, though, I need to seat it down right here on this shoulder, and that will stop it from racking or moving. So I slightly undercut this surface.
Oh, so you got a little concave surface there.
Absolutely.
So you cut into it a little bit as you go to center.
Right.
Well, what about turning one of these little itsy-bitsy guys?
Yeah, there's
how do we do that?
A couple of ways to do that. One, I've got some smaller jaws that I can put in this to grip a smaller piece of wood. I don't need to waste 1 3/4. But another option is if you've got a number 2 Morse taper, which is almost universal anymore in wood turning, a 9/16 inch square that I cut on a table saw here out of hard maple, whittle the corners off. I can put that in here and now take the same mallet and drive it in for about 1/2 inch. It will give me plenty of support to turn the stem part of the top.
Okay, and so the stem part, you turn each blank turns one stem.
Yes. It'd
Okay.
be very hard to come out, 7 or 8 inches and try to get several. So for this, I normally just try to get one stem.
Okay. Now, another thing that I see here is this device. Why don't you explain what that does?
Well, this is what most people call a Jacob style chuck, and here this is a keyless type.
'Cause it looks like the chuck that would be on a drill press or on the end of your drill.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So what we're going to have to do is drill the hole through the body, and I'm going to do that on the lathe.
So there's a hole in the body, right? Okay.
This will just take the place of the center of the tailstock, and we're going to use
so
that
we
to
just
drill.
pull the live center out, and so the taper on the back of this chuck automatically centers it.
Yes.
Okay. And then you can use this to drill the hole. Let's get set up and get started. You do the body first, correct?
That's what I like to do, is turn
Okay.
a series of bodies, because
Kind of Turner's choice.
it is. The only problem is I couldn't really fit the hole to the stem.
Oh, okay.
So it's better to do the bodies first and then
Okay.
custom fit the hole.
Because you can turn the diameter of the hub here.
Right.
You can turn that to fit the hole. Okay.
But I couldn't really change
Okay.
the hole size very easily.
All right. Well, let's get started.
Okay, sounds good. The first thing I have to do is mount this in the chuck. Now, I'll start with a square. That's very important for the way I'm going to chuck this. And I've scratched from corner to corner with an awl, and I've marked it with a pencil, indented it. What I do, I put it in here loosely. I don't tighten it up, because just by tightening it down, it may not center it very well. So I leave it where there's a little bit of play. I bring up the tailstock with a center, and I put that into the hole that I've made that is the center of the block. Now, lock everything there. Now tighten it. And when I tighten this down firmly, that's going to be very nice and on center. Wear eye protection anytime you're doing turning, but especially with chucks, like we're going to be using 2 types of chucks. So always have eye protection. I'm going to turn on the lathe just to make sure everything looks good. Yeah, that's going to work. Now I'm going to start turning.
Now, is this if you're working on you've got a variable speed lathe here? What if someone has a step pulley lathe? What speed should they be operating at here?
You can work at slower speeds without any danger. The faster you go, there are some hazards. If I had to pick a speed for something like this, 800 to 1200 would not be excessive.
Okay. Okay. And that's where to start. So
Yes, to start it off with. That'll be fine.
good. Well, let's get yourself ready to go and
Okay,
start making some shavings.
let's do it. Well, the first thing I need to do is create a cylinder, and I'm going to do a cut right here that will stop the wood from splintering. And I'm just going to push off my corners. You could do this same action with a spindle roughing gouge if you don't have a skew or you're not adept with a skew. So I'm just going to turn this into a nice cylinder, kind of give me my major diameter here. You can touch back there to see if it's round, and it's not. I can still feel some flats. Never touch on top or in front. So just a few more passes and I should be very close to my cylinder. Next thing I'll do is I can do this with the long point or the short point. I'm going to start rolling this over, bringing this over. The face of it wasn't really clean.
Okay, so you've cleaned the face.
But I
and you're
really
starting
have-
to create the little disc shape for the
Right.
top of the body of the.
And I want this to be kind of a dome shape. I don't think they look very good if they're just flat. If you're not adept with a skew, I'll do the same cut with detail gouge or spindle gouge. And it's going to be similar.
Okay.
This is rolling the tool over.
You're just gonna. It's like rolling a bead with.
Absolutely, like this will be like the right side of a bead.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to get my shape on it. Let's see if I can make that cut all the way down. I can go all the way down, it doesn't really matter. That's
Okay.
a nice finish.
Okay.
Now I need to prepare to do the drilling.
So you're gonna drill the hole that goes through the disc. That's the next step.
Absolutely.
Okay, but
And
you got to prepare for that. So
something that helps is to actually make a recess for the drill bit to kind of lead into.
okay.
And I'm doing this with the tip of the skew. You could also do this with a small parting tool.
Yep, you're just creating a little divot right in the dead center.
Absolutely. And hopefully what will happen, that drill bit's going to want to go right into that. There's also another function. If you have a lathe that the head pivots, be sure you've lined up the tailstock and headstock, or otherwise the drilling is going to be really off. Now for safety, get your tool rest completely out of the way. I'm going to bring up the tailstock here, move the live center, get that out of the way. And again, I'm using a bit here, either a quarter or this is just slightly below a quarter. It's not that critical, to be honest with you. Just in that range is what I like to do. I've set up here to do the drilling with the Jacobs chuck and the tailstock. Remove my tool rest so there's no pinch points for me.
Okay, now what you're going to do there is drill out the hole in the center of this, the disc-shaped body part, right? And
That's
that
correct.
hole's for the spindle.
And it's just a process of cranking it in. I like to go very slow. That looks like that's going in nicely, the bit. If you're off, often you'll see the end of the bit jump a little bit. So this is nice. You only have to drill about a ½ inch or so. Not going to hurt anything because I'm going to make more of the disc bodies. And that's it. The drilling's not very exciting stuff.
Now it must be fairly important that that hole be right in the middle.
Right. And I'll show you a way to fix that in case your lathe is not precise enough to drill a nice centered hole. What happens sometimes is, for a variety of reasons, the circle will not be perfectly round, at least to a wood turner. And you can tell that with the lathe running or with the lathe off sometimes. It looks like you've made a slight oval. Okay. And now we're going to have a problem with this top.
Now you would get an oval shape if your lathe, if the headstock and tailstock weren't perfectly aligned, right?
Right, poor alignment, a dull bit.
The bit was dull.
A wood that has some strong grain that just pushes it. And all I've taken here is just one of these inexpensive 1/4 inch scrapers, and I've made it more elliptical and elongated than they came. Okay. And all I'm going to do is just go in here and just barely touch the inside of that opening right along there, and I'm going to chamfer the outside even here. I'm not trying to hide anything with in terms of the seam. So like that, but that's usually all it takes to true that up. Now the next thing I need to do is to cut me some clearance in here so I can work the back side. Okay. Now I could use a regular parting tool like this or a thin curve parting tool. This is just going to cut me some room to get in there and work with either my skew or with a gouge. And now don't go too far because we have a hole through there, and also it won't have enough support. So again, I can do this with either a skew chisel or a detail gouge type. So I'll just
going to round the backside, kind of like you rounded the top side.
I do almost the same kind of shape. And this is normally this is going to be the bottom side, and if you leave a little more mass down there, it'll probably spin longer and make it bottom heavy too, which is not bad.
So the profile that you're turning is still a convex profile, but it might be a little there's a little more mass there than
absolutely. So I kind of rounded this, gave it a little more fullness down there.
Sure.
This corner, I don't like the corners very sharp, simply because as you drop them and they fling off the table or land, you don't want corners that are going to bust off. Now I'm going to sand it too. What I've done here is lightly sanded this, got rid of this sharp corner, especially sanded the front, did it with a tool rest out of the way. I'm going to part this down a little further to give me some more working room. I don't want to part all the way through yet because I still need to make a cut here. The parting tool leaves a lot of torn grain, so again, I could use a skew chisel or I could use this detail gouge.
Again, you turn the gouge as you push in.
Absolutely, and rolled over on its side. Now that should have given me a really nice clean cut. I'm ready now to part it off and catch it.
Okay, let's see that. Maestro. Now, do you normally catch it with your hand, or do you usually put a towel down?
There's a couple of ways to do this. If you're adept, you can catch it, but sometimes I take a nice towel and kind of create a little cradle. Okay. It doesn't go flying across the room. What it'll do, it'll drop straight down. And remember, I'm parting off into a hole, so it's going to come up sooner than you would think.
So when you're adept, it means you're using one hand on the tool to cut through.
Right, but if that seems scary or you don't want to try it, say like that, and there I've done The backside, it's not horrible, but I'm going to show you how I would clean this off.
Okay.
And even make this just as fine as the front.
Okay.
That's the next step.
All right.
Now, normally what I would do is I would just keep cutting more of these discs off of this, kind of like cutting off from a pepperoni stick or something. But I see this protrusion that was left from the larger parting tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and use that. What I keep around is some poplar in a little square that I can do what I'm about to do afterwards. But this is a good opportunity, and it'll show you the basic technique anyway. I can use the skew here to kind of peel this down and undercut, so the little curve to the body is going to fit in there. Now I'm going to do a taper so I can find my diameter. Turn off the lathe to do this. And again, what I'm doing is what we would call reverse chucking. See, that just wants to start to go on there. So that shows me the diameter I need to work to. Now I'm going to peel this down.
So you just scored the end of that little tenon.
Yeah, with a taper out at the end, and it kind of shows me what the diameter needs to be. Let's see if I went too far. No, I didn't, which is good.
So how do you know? Oh, you weren't able to put it all the way on.
No, and I don't want to
So what
yet.
you
I don't want
want
it
a
too loose.
snug fit on this thing.
Absolutely, it's got to hold it while I'm turning it.
Okay.
So, but I'm real close. I'm going to shorten that up a little bit too. Doesn't need to be that long.
So by reverse chucking, what you've done, you've parted this thing off and you've turned it around 180 degrees. So you've now got the bottom side facing out. And this is going to allow
there we
you
go.
This is going to allow you to clean off that bottom side.
Absolutely. Now,
And maybe even do a little more shaping if you want.
absolutely, because I can do a light cut. Now, it's not a heavy cut because it tends to want to pull it off. But the end of this, when I part it off, is kind of squared. It doesn't look good, and it's not going to fit very well. So just going to be a light cut here to kind of finish this part off. And this is also going to allow me to sand it. I'm making it slightly convex. And I've got the same issue about that hole. I want to be sure that that's running true.
Okay.
So I'm going to come back around like we did before.
Yep. So you're going to.
And I'm just going to touch it.
Yep. So both ends of the hole, especially because this is the end. The spindle is going to mount from this end. Right?
Absolutely. I want to be sure this is round.
Okay.
Okay. And then I would go back, do just a little bit of light sanding here. Doesn't require much. And since I'm going to marble this, I just take it to 220 and that'll be fine.
If you're going to put a clear finish on, how far do you sand?
Boy, maple is a real bad wood about scratching, so I would take it to 320 or 400. You're not getting rid of torn grain. What you're doing there is getting rid of your sanding scratches.
Right.
And some woods just tend to scratch more than others when you sand them.
So each level of grit then removes the scratches from the previous level.
Right. I want to show you how to turn this part of the top, called the stem or the axle. I've put in a square. It's a little bigger than what I probably actually needed for this one. Normally I use a 1/2 to 5/8. A little bigger is not so bad because it'll give some more weight to it on the bottom. So I'm going to use the skew chisel to do the turning here. And the first thing I want to do is cut in to stop it from any splintering that it might do as I rough it and shape it. Now I'm just going to plane off the corners.
How long do you usually make these spindles?
I think overall length's about 1.5 inches or so, but it varies. You can make the area for your fingers fairly long if you wanted to. You don't have much weight up there. I definitely don't want to make them too short. At least give your hands 1 inch to grip. So that's enough. I've got it rounded up into the cylinder. Now this is called peeling. I'm just going to peel that down. And this is going to be where my fingers are going to grip, so I know I'm going to make that small.
And here again, you're working from a large diameter to a small diameter.
Right. I'm just going to kind of rough this in where I'm heading. That's plenty right there.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to get this whole thing thinned down prematurely because it'll be hard to turn out here. So now I'm going to start out here, start bringing her down.
Okay.
I'm going to do this in stages. If you want a top that'll spin upside down, which is a way to spin these, take this and kind of roll this over. You don't need to put a point on it, it turns out. Just kind of roll over the end. And I can actually flip these over and spin them upside down. That'll be a nice spinning surface. Now what I'm going to do is do this in sections. I'm going to plane this. You can get it so thin that it's actually hard to grip. So I'm probably going to do
size?
about 1/8 of an inch or so.
Okay. That's the diameter that you're
Of the
talking about.
diameter. And see, that's probably enough right there for that section. And if you leave it too thick, you kind of make it a little bit top heavy and it won't spin as long. So
okay.
you're going to have to make a few of these and see.
So the idea is that concentrating the mass on the base is a way to make the top spin longer.
Longer. Not
Okay.
that it's going to spin better so much as it'll definitely spin longer. So again, this is good practice. You know, you could try this with a detail gouge or a spindle roughing gouge to some extent, but this cut with a skew certainly does it a lot easier in terms of leveling and making that straight.
Sure. And you are using the skew just as a hand plane there.
Absolutely it is. This is still called a planing cut. Now that's probably long enough right there for the stem. I'm going to make it a little bit longer. But I think that's going to be more than enough. Yeah, and now I'm going to plane that.
Now, at this point, it's almost too late to go back out to the edge, to the end,
I
and try
couldn't
to
work
work
that.
because it's
I
too
couldn't
fragile.
work
It'd be too
that.
fragile. Yeah.
Right. So this is also a good time, if you wanted to, you could even sand the stem. And keep in mind, the stem right here, this part of it, needs to be a smaller diameter than the hole.
Sure, it's got to fit through the hole.
Right, and so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. That's still going to be way too big for my base,
Okay.
the very base. So I'm going to have some extra wood on here. This is going to be the section that I'm going to fit the top onto, the top body that we turned. So I'm going to go ahead and just start bringing this down. I know it's bigger than I really need right now, and that's okay.
Okay, you just want a flat surface, and you're going to do the same thing again that you did earlier with that little stub
Absolutely.
tenon. You're going to create this so that the disc body will just snugly slide
Press on. Now, you can start, one trick of finding that diameter is to start doing a little taper here,
Sure.
like that.
So it'll fit at the front when you slide it on.
That's probably still too big. But again, it's better to be too big than too small at this point.
Too small means you start over.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's definitely too big to push
Okay.
on there. Let's take off a little bit more. Do this in stages. It's just too hard to measure that exactly and just do it where you can measure it with calipers or something and just snap it on. So that should be getting very close to starting to fit the hole. And it's just wanting to start to go on there. So that gives me a reference.
So you can just score it with as you force it over the edge.
Yeah,
so
you can actually, it burnished it a little bit,
Yeah.
and that actually gives me an idea, a reference now of what to work towards. But every cut you do here on a diameter to a diameter is double. You push the tool in a 16th,
Yep.
it takes off an 8.
Making the final refinement there.
That's nice. What I've done now is got this fit on there nice and tightly. I cut back a little bit to protrude here, that little area. I think that looks nice. You can roll that into a bead. I need to sand my stem though here just a little bit. Remove the tool rest, of course. Support it while you're sanding it. I'm just using a little 220 here.
Okay, and by sanding the gripping part with the body on, you can't possibly sand the hub, which is something
Right.
you would not want to sand that
No,
hub
I don't
at
want to
all.
hit that at all. That is a press fit.
You
and
fit that precisely, and you don't
Right.
want to alter it in any way at this point.
So now the last thing is see if I can get this off, which you want to be able to get it off at least one more time. Now what I need to do is to just round this off and form the point, and we're done.
So while you're doing that, why don't you explain a little bit about when you say form the point? Do you actually form a sharp point or a rounded point, or
Well,
what
I
are
used to think that
what
you
have
needed.
you found that works the best for this?
Yeah, I know. I used to think you needed a really sharp point till I was in Japan, and they pointed out, no, actually a little bit slight roundness to it will do better. And over time, the point's going to wear down
gonna
anyway.
wear down anyway.
So the rounded point, there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not going to try to get what I would call a sharp point. Now you can do this a couple of ways. Again, you could use the skew, which would be my first choice, but I'll show you I can do it with the gouge. It's just like rolling down the left side of a bead. I'm going to cut me a little bit of clearance in here to work. So I don't want this too massive. In this little area right here, I'm going to chamfer that. I think it looks better. Actually chamfer that just a slight amount. That's going to create a shadow between between this piece and the disc. Now this is just about ready to part off, and you can part off with a gouge just doing this. I'd recommend not using a parting tool, as it tends to tear the grain. So skew chisel will do it lovely. I'm going to move this back, and it just needs a very light amount of sanding right here. That's a little raggedy. And then just a little bit here. Now I'm ready to part it off. Either catch it in your hand or have a towel down, again, is what you could be using. So this is just like rolling over a bead. And I'm not going to end up with a real sharp point. I'm just cutting some clearance out in front. There we go. And that's it. So we have our two pieces now. All I have to do is take the disc, put it on there, press her down, and that's it. And that's a nice fit. And there's our two-piece top, ready for whatever finish treatment we want to do.